All right, first off, a bit of disclaimer. These are my own personal views and not necessarily reflect those of the US Army, the DoD, or the US government. So one of the things that I think is problematic in this space is that there's too much overpromise about what AI-enabled technologies can do today and for this foreseeable future. As Carl Sagan said, and I'll paraphrase it poorly, there's a lot of baloney out there. And part of the problem is this notion of cognitive anthropomorphism, right? So that we see AI doing a very powerful and unique task, one that we believe it exceeds or meets human level intelligence or ability. But then we end up, in a sense, subconsciously shifting the goalposts from it. For example, we could think of the game Go, and it's amazing what, AlphaGo did and AlphaZero did with that game. But is that really a matter of the artificial intelligence becoming the I part, the intelligent piece? Or is it really that we've discovered that the game Go, as complex as it is very heavily reliant upon computation, and that the AI is better at those kinds of certain tasks? And so I think that this is tied back into one of my main themes, and that's how do we educate the every person about artificial intelligence? And in terms of the government, the military, or the business world, you're going to invest billions of dollars in this technology, and we want to ensure that we're doing it in the right sort of way, but we need to understand what its limitations are. Well, there are so many questions, and many of them are equally important. But one that really stands out in my mind is the question we have to ask ourselves. Typically, it's in the tech industry. We ask, can we do this? But I think when we need to think about AI and AI ethics and the concerns that have been raised, we need to ask the question: should we be doing this? In other words, is artificial intelligence the right set of tools to solve a particular problem space? And it's really about aligning values, right? Because we see a problem or a problem area. We want to leverage this exciting, powerful technology, but we need to ensure that it aligns with our values. And Brian Christian calls this, the alignment problem. So even starting from that initial question, when we're looking at researching the problem to address and potential solution space very early in the design process, we need to ask ourselves, should we be using this technology? And we need to ask that in the broad sort of sense to include those legal and ethical considerations, as well as, quite frankly, from a practical standpoint, is this the right investment moving forward? Will it actually solve the problem that we're attempting to do? So I think that it's really about aligning our values. So as I mentioned in the main body of the talk, the military is looking at artificial intelligence and how it can best increase efficiencies throughout all of the enterprise processes, not just on the battlefield, but some of the ones on the battlefield that militaries around the world are seeking to explore include intelligence collection, and then intelligence fusion once you get this vast body of data, intel that it has been collected. There's cyber defense, right? Because of the concerns over cyber over the last years, we've seen examples of different sort of cyber crime and cyber strikes against different companies, as well as national institutions. Can we leverage artificial intelligence to help protect those critical and vulnerable systems? Predictive maintenance. We can save potentially millions, hundreds of millions of dollars by more accurately predicting when particular systems will fail in their life cycle, and be more aligned with better spending our resources in a timely manner to ensure that they're kept at a high level of maintenance. I also discussed a bit about fires, right? And the concept on the battlefield of the sensor to shooter or clearance of fires. Work is being done, in different armies to identify a way that we can reduce that chain, that in a sense mirroring Boyd's OODA loop, so that we can get accurate, timely fires that are discriminate on the right target by the right system. And of course, there's a lot of work being done on uncrewed systems, whether it's UAVs, air systems, ground systems, even work in those used in the oceans or underwater. Now, much of that work is focused on, and it's not true or fully autonomous systems, but yet artificial intelligence can help improve those automated and autonomous processes. So those are broadly the main areas on the battlefield. But of course, we have to remember we're looking at how we can better manage talent, how we can just think of running a bureaucracy. Is there a way to leverage artificial intelligence to help streamline and generate efficiencies there as well? So all areas are being explored. So part of the question about how to maximize that tension between the benefits and risk, it partly goes back to that earlier question, right? Of should we use artificial intelligence to solve this particular problem area? And part of the reason is because right now, currently the narrow AI that we're working with, right, or the layered narrow AI systems, right, they're brittle. There's problems of overfitting. What we don't truly understand in terms of the long tail of unintended consequences, we haven't developed a full ontology of failures, how the system may fail in ways that right now are currently unanticipated. And part of it is thinking about the law of armed conflict and international humanitarian law, of course. Are we developing systems that are certainly in keeping with the laws that are currently out there, the rule of law that we feel is so important, as well as the AI principles, right? For example, the US Department of Defense has developed and published our own AI ethics principles, and can we ensure that the systems we're developing, whether it's on the battlefield or a back office application, are aligned with those principles. And it really ties back into this notion of risk management. Again, risk management is only a part of the solution, part of the way to maximize the benefits. But if you think about that process of identifying risk, looking at steps to mitigate risks, looking at residual risks, and then in a sense, having the ability to say, okay, this risk is, once mitigated, is acceptable or not, is going to be very important moving forward. One of the things that the military has, excuse me, that you may not see across industry and other institutions is this notion of command responsibility. That the commander is ultimately responsible for all the actions that her unit does on the battlefield. And this is a very important, in a sense, piece, because when we look at employing a system on the battlefield, right, the buck stops at the commander. But we also need to be careful that when we're talking about the accountability of it, we're not just talking about whom we should blame should there be an error or unintended consequence, no matter how dire. And part of it is because of the entire design development of the system, there are many steps along the way where error may have been introduced. So in a sense, the commander is ultimately responsible, but the question will still remain to what degree. And that's going to be determined by, the law, regulations about, the particular society, and even sort of, the international potential condemnation of certain acts. The key to this, of course, is, back to education for every person, or in this case, in the military, for every soldier. what does each individual, from the youngest private to the highest level, need to know about the benefits, risks, and limitations of the artificial intelligence enabled system that they are, whether they're in the design phase, the deployment phase, the use phase, that they bring to bear in that. Again, because it's tied closely again back to this notion of risk management. The better educated they are, the better educated they'll be able to make in terms of whether they believe that they're willing to accept certain risk. And that engenders trust in the system. Because again, soldiers aren't going to use these systems unless they trust in them. And by that, I mean, not just that it's reliable, but they're confident they know how it's going to react in the particular context they're using it. That means they've been trained in using it, they've tested it in this case, and if not, then they may choose not to use it. That's really a great question. And I think it really lines up with this concept of many efforts or many hands, right? So one of my personal lines of operations or effort areas, and one that we're doing with the US Army, is how do we increase productive collaboration across industry, government, and academia, right? Because we know that regulations are coming, right? But there should be a desire to be a part of that, to help shape it, right? Because part of the concern is we want to ensure that we have the right kind of regulation, right? To ensure that, in a sense, it's in keeping with, our values and the rule of law. But we want to ensure that it also doesn't stifle innovation, because again, although there are certainly areas of high concern and high risk, we want to be able to leverage this technology in areas that really can be productive to society at large. And if you remember back in 2020, the Berkman Institute identified 36 sets of principles. So a lot of work is being done, not just nationally, but internationally, identifying different principles or guidelines for designing and developing and using AI-enabled technology. And so the question there is how do we put those principles into practice? And part of that is going to be the development of laws and regulations, policies that are in keeping, again, with the values of the institution, of the company or country they represent, as well as the international community.